Chapter 17, Part 3, French for Reading. We're going to look at the imperfect of the subjunctive. Now, good news is that this is a fairly rare test, but you wouldn't expect more than one on your final exam, most likely. But on the other hand, so it's good that it's rare, but boy, do people hate this tense. Even the French people hate this tense because uh, it's just difficult to form and to understand what's going on, sometimes even to recognize it. So all we're going to do is we're going to look for the sign of the imperfect of the subjunctive. I'm not going to give you the whole list. You can look in your verb charts in the back of the book. But the key is that on the third person singular, there is, and on the other singulars, there's a circumflex on a vowel. It might be an I, might be a U, might be an A, but you've got this circumflex on the final vowel. That's the sign of the imperfect of the subjunctive, or it's got a double S, but it's not an IR verb. Um, so that's the key things to look for: the circumflex or the double S that you wouldn't expect. That would mean the imperfect of the subjunctive. Now, like most subjunctives, the translation depends on the context, which is nice because you can say, oh, whoa, I don't know what that verb is, probably a subjunctive. I'll translate it so it makes sense. That kind of works. It's a little nice to know what's going on. Um, it's usually translated by past tense. So here we have a sentence, bien que. So bien que means although. Now it's important to memorize this one because you could say, well, that. No, it's not well, that. It's although. Bien qu'il travailla dur. And so here we have the imperfect of the subjunctive for travailler. So although he was working hard, il n'a rien compris. So here's the passé composé of comprendre, to understand. Compris is the past participle, and with ne rien, he understood nothing. So although he was working hard, he understood nothing. So the imperfect of the subjunctive, ne rien for nothing, and then the passé composé of comprendre here. Okay, now let's talk. We've talked about the conditional before, how you have the same stem as the future, and you kind of leave it as an infinitive, and then you add the imperfect on it. There's a second form of the conditional also that means the same thing. The second form of the conditional is the same as the imperfect of the subjunctive, often used with inversion, putting the subject afterwards. So if you were to see the the imperfect of the subjunctive in some situation where you weren't expecting the subjunctive, that would mean it's the second form of the conditional. Now, this is even rarer, and it's not even listed in the recommended dictionary, but sometimes it happens. So here we have a sentence. Fut-elle la plus belle femme du monde, je ne me marierai pas avec elle. So here we have fut-elle. So we've got inversion going on. We've got the circumflex on here, so we know that's an imperfect subjunctive. And then fut, that looks like the passé simple of être, which it is. This is the imperfect of the subjunctive of être. So, but we don't expect a subjunctive at the beginning of the sentence, so this must be the second form of the conditional. And we have one conditional here, and then we have a second conditional here, separated by a comma. So this is one of our even if sentences. Even if she was the la plus belle femme du monde, the most beautiful woman in the world, je ne me marierai pas avec elle. Ne me marierai pas is I would not marry myself with her. And that's how we say to marry somebody. We use se marier avec to marry someone. So even if she were the most beautiful woman in the world, I would not marry her. Now we could leave this first one in the conditional sense. We could say, would she be the most beautiful woman in the world? I would not marry her, and that makes sense. And that's interesting because we have this conditional with the inversion, just like we have it in the French. showing kind of like how French has influenced the French language or the English language so much. Okay, well, so that's that second form of the conditional, which is the imperfect of the subjunctive, isn't used too often, but it's by itself, but it's used more often with the past conditional, or sometimes called the conditional perfect, than with the present conditional. So we're going to use this in past conditional, not in present conditional sentences. So this means that the past conditional has the same verb form of what we could call the pluperfect of the subjunctive. Now, what do we mean the pluperfect of the subjunctive? That would be the subject plus the imperfect subjunctive of an auxiliary verb plus a past participle. So now, previously in this lesson, we looked at the helping verb in the future or uh, in the future or in the conditional. Um, here we're going to have the imperfect subjunctive, the auxiliary verb in the imperfect subjunctive that has a little hat there. Now, verb charts sometimes list the past conditional to and not the present conditional to because it's rare. Some don't list either. So you just have to kind of go through the verb charts, figure out what's going on there. So let's look at some examples of the second form of the past conditional. Il eut fini. Here's a standalone sentence, and it looks like it has a subjunctive. It looks like it has the imperfect of the subjunctive as a helping verb there, but we know that wouldn't be the case because subjunctives can only occur in after que in subordinate clauses. So this helping verb looks like imperfect of the subjunctive, but we know it has to be the second form of the conditional. And so it's making finir into the past conditional. And so we would translate that he would have finished. Same thing as il aurait fini. We could have had this in um, the, the conditional to have a past conditional, but here we have it in the imperfect of the subjunctive or the which is the helping verb for the past conditional. Sans notre avertissement, so without our warning, or if we so without our warning, il eut mangé la viande pourrie. So here we've got il eut mangé again with the imperfect of the subjunctive, or this turns into the past conditional. He would have eaten the spoiled meat. Without our warning, he would have eaten the spoiled meat. Pourri is spoiled. That's interesting because we get our word potpourri. That means spoiled flower pot. Po is flower pot. Pourri is spoiled or rotten. And that smelly stuff is like dead flowers. It's called potpourri, spoiled flower pot. But here it's le viande pourri. So without our warning, or if we hadn't warned him, he would have eaten the spoiled meat. Would have eaten. Past conditional. So here's a bunch of exercises. These are really tough. This last one is from a ministerial decree that was made concerning the grammar, something that we would probably never have in English. But try to make sense of these as much as you can. Write them down and compare your responses on the last video.